What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today, we'll be chatting with Brad Rowland of Locked On Hawks as the Hawks have reeled off 7 straight wins. What has changed for the Atlanta Hawks over this 7-game win streak? How have they gotten better, and how can they get back to where they were a year ago as the feel-good NBA story of the season with their impressive run to the Western Conference Finals compared to their suboptimal start of this season? But first, a quick message from our friends over at Built Bar, because look, it is the new year, so that means New Year's resolutions. If yours is about getting fit or eating healthier, make sure you include Built Bar in your plan. Built Bar is a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, maybe even better than a candy bar. Built Bar makes it easier to stick to your resolution because it tastes so good, you're going to want to eat it. Unlike other protein bars, which can be gritty or chalky, or the consistency is just a little bit off. And the flavors, they've got so many amazing flavors over at Built Bar: strawberry, cookies and cream, raspberry, mint brownie, peanut butter, my personal favorite, coconut brownie chunk. You can't go wrong with a single flavor on their menu. And you can check them out. Just go to built.com and use promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your very next order of the best tasting protein bars on the market. Again, that's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. Joining us now is Brad Rowland of Locked On Hawks. Brad, fresh off a win against the Los Angeles Lakers, extending their win streak to 7 in a row. What has been the key for this Atlanta Hawks team over this recent stretch of play?
I think it's a lot of different things, which is not a sexy answer necessarily, but I think kind of having the team back and healthy is number one for me. Having their full complement of players, really for the first time in like 2 years. Even last year, as they went to the conference finals, they never were healthy at the same time. And the last couple of games, they've been healthy all the way through. They've had their best personnel defensively, which kind of leads to better results, because that was really the problem in the first half of the season, was the Hawks just couldn't get stops with any regularity. So it's a lot of different things. It's a lot of health factors for sure, but basically it's two-way play. They have to be able to defend, and with personnel being a key part of defense, they having everybody back has been huge.
I'm glad you highlight the defense here because, I've been a little concerned with the drop-off in the Hawks' performance on that side of the basketball, right? They weren't exactly, defensive juggernauts last season, but, middle of the pack, kind of respectable, 18th overall defensive rating. This year, plummeting all the way down to 27th. How much of that has just been because of the personnel not being there versus are you seeing anything else that is causing a slippage on that side of the basketball?
I think it's been a little bit of personnel and a little bit of just not performing well. Like at one point in the season on my podcast, I went through like player for player and like, okay, is this player performing up to their level of expectations on defense? And basically across the board, the answer was no. And that's just my own evaluation. But it also was guys not playing particularly well, not a lot of cohesion. In this winning streak, they've won 7 games in a row. They've been allowing about 108 points per 100 possessions, which is top 10 level in the league. And they're not going to be that good. I think last year is more of like a leading spot where they would be defensively, whereas like middle of the pack. Last season, it was Clint Capella kind of carrying a huge workload for them and kind of covering up for a lot of sins. And this year, he's not been quite as good. He's still been good. He's still a plus defender at center. He's just not like defensive player of the year caliber like he was a year ago. But if you go down the roster, like they were playing without probably 2 of the 3 of Capella, Onyeka Okongwu, their second-year big man, and DeAndre Hunter, who are 3, I would say pretty clearly their 3 best defenders. And if you only have one of those guys available, it really, really hurts them. So it's kind of a combination of not having their better defenders and also having some of the guys who are more, I would say, average defenders playing well below that. Like Bogdanovic this year has been pretty shaky defensively, playing guys like Lou Williams, Danilo Gallinari off the bench a lot. Those guys are bad defenders. So it's kind of a mix of all those things in particular, but winning also breeds defensive effort, which is you can never kind of tell which side of that has more to do with the other. Like when you win, is it because you play better defense, or because you're winning, you're dialed in more on defensively? So there's lots of different factors in play, but the results have been pretty good recently.
You mentioned Onyeka Okongwu there. He's a guy that's, he missed, big chunk of the season already, but back in the rotation, again, mentioning the Hawks kind of being whole for one of the first times in a long time. What has his play meant kind of in that backup 5 role behind Clint Capella?
He's been huge. I mean, he was fantastic on Sunday in their win against the Lakers. I think he had 16 points in like 21 minutes. He was just flying around. He's a play finisher. He's really versatile too. Like there's this movement. I'm sure you're not surprised when there's a former lottery pick. There's this movement now in Hawks land that he's better than Capella. He should be starting. He should be playing 30 minutes a game. And he's really good. I've always loved Okongwu. I had him in my top 5 in that draft class. Like he's an awesome prospect and he's already a really good player. he still has some limitations. Like he's kind of small, and rebounding is not his best thing in the world right now, but he's really mobile. He's a great finisher. And the biggest thing for me is that now they can play 48 minutes of high-level defense at center. And for this roster, the way it's constructed with Trae Young and some of their perimeter guys, they got to have good center play defensively, and they now have it for 48 minutes between Capella and Okongwu. So having him back has been huge. And even on Sunday, like he closed. He played the whole fourth quarter. He played over Capella, which was okay with me. He was playing great. And that's a pitch that Miller can now throw where they can go a little smaller, a little bit more mobile, and have his energy and speed be out there, and they kind of match up well with smaller teams.
Bogdan Bogdanovic, I should say, pardon me. He's also a guy that's missed, a little bit of time, been in and out of the lineup, back now, handful of games under his belt, but he's missed time with the right knee sore. There's kind of a plethora of injuries that have kept him out of the lineup. What's been how difficult, I should say, has it been for him to really catch any semblance of rhythm this season with the extended periods of time that he keeps, finding himself missing?
Yeah, I think that's a good point that you're making there, because dating back to the playoffs last year, he had this incredible run the second half of last season, which kind of went under the radar because the Hawks were winning so well overall, and the attention was paid to Trae and all that stuff, as it should have been. But Bogdanovic was out of his mind in the second half of last season. I think short of Steph Curry, he might have been the best shooter in the world for like 3 months. He shot 50% from three for like 30 games. It was kind of incredible. But then he got banged up in the playoffs. He was kind of dragging his leg around in the playoffs, then had an offseason surgery, and then hasn't been the same guy physically this year. I'm not sure if it's all solved now, but he missed those 5-6 games recently. He's come back. He looks better, not quite all the way to the same level, but having him around as a guy who hunts his own shot, he's very aggressive. The Hawks have a lot of good shooters, but they don't have a lot of like aggressive scores on the perimeter. It's Trae Young. But you have guys like Hunter and Herter who are good players, but are not always like going to go after their own shot. Bogdanovic hunts his own shot, and I think that's a good thing to have him on the second unit. This has been working recently with him coming off the bench. McMillan kind of talked about this week, like, we're going to leave it how it is, and they're winning, so that's kind of what happens when that happens. But I'll be interested to see how they handle that, because last year he was a starter. He's making big money, and he's not starting right now. And I think it's working, but he's got to be the same guy that he was last year, both offensively and even defensively, where he's not this stalwart, but he can't be a huge liability either.
So what is the Hawks' kind of biggest need rolling into the NBA trade deadline, and how active are you expecting them to be at the trade deadline this year?
It's really interesting. If you asked me this 2 weeks ago, I was much more confident the Hawks might make a bigger move, honestly. And now they've won 7 games in a row, and it might be difficult internally, externally to pull the trigger on a big move when they're hot. And this same core made their run last year in kind of similar fashion. I'm not saying that they're going to make conference finals, because they probably won't do that, but they do. It's a lot harder to like make one of those like wholesale change kind of moves in the middle of a hot streak, and that shouldn't necessarily matter. Like in the grand scheme of things, winning 7 games in a row should not change your franchise trajectory, but it is just practically in the real world hard to make a big move when you're doing that. Now they kind of already made a trade with Cam Reddish. It just was a month early, and that was honestly the only guy on the team that I was pretty confident would be traded before the deadline. There are other guys that are available for sure, but one of the things that makes the Hawks difficult and also really interesting in trade stuff is that they don't have a huge weakness. They're really deep, and they don't have a position where it's like, okay, they have to do better here. That's a strength. It's also a challenge sometimes because they are so deep. So consolidation trade is a big term that's been thrown around here for a long time. Those are hard deals to do, though. So I think I've gone from like thinking they're definitely going to do something to now I'm not sure if they're going to. I'm not sure if they even should, depending on what it is.
Last thing here, Brad, before we let you go, what are you hoping to see more of out of the Hawks, in this second half of the season? Something that maybe you haven't seen out of this team to this point?
Short of health, I mean, that's the big thing that everybody wants to see from every team. But mostly I want to see how they continue to defend, and particularly defend on the perimeter. I know I talked about it before, but their perimeter defense in particular was kind of ghastly at times this year, and it's been better recently. But there's a baseline you have to be a contending level, top level playoff team. And last year they found it on defense, and this year they haven't had it for very long. So if they could put together some more stretches where this winning streak has been good for that, but give me 2 weeks, give me 3 weeks, give me 4 weeks, give me 6 weeks of quality defense, and then it's a lot easier to buy in, because as good as they are on offense, everybody knows that they're top 3 in offense in the league this year. You can't be 25th in defense and go anywhere. So I think that they know that internally. They preach that internally, but can they defend for long stretches?
Defense has been a big topic of this conversation, Brad. Realistically, where do you paint this team when they're fully healthy, when they've got all their guys on the floor? How good do you think they can be defensively?
I think it's more like where they were a year ago, where they finished, I think, like 17th or 18th in defense. They're not going to be top 10. This is not a personnel team that has that kind of talent on defense. You're building around Trae Young, and you're not perfect everywhere else either, but you can't be in the bottom 5. It's like get to average should be the goal. I think average defense should be the goal, and that's realistic, but you'll settle for top 20. And that won't get you killed, especially when if you maintain this top 3 offense, that gives you a lot of grace, because if you're that truly elite on offense, you can be shaky on defense. You just can't be terrible.
Yeah, just can't be a bottom 5 team on defense, because that's pretty much a death sentence or a lottery sentence in this case. But you're going to have us covered for everything Hawks basketball over at Locked On Hawks. Brad, appreciate you stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
Thanks for having me.